Hello, it's Rafael Gutierrez, and today I am going to talk a little bit about one of the things that I've come across a few times now, and that is some people talking about whether it's safer to get hit with a glove or without a glove, or how big the glove should be. Now, one of the interesting things is have been some investigations. Unfortunately, most of the investigations that have come out have either been for actually the ones that are mainly brought about are the ones that were done for entertainment purposes. Now, I would figure this channel, the way I'm doing it, is mostly entertainment, but I do try to give you the most correct facts that I can. Now, and one of the things I found is most of the time, when people are talking about how much force is in a punch, they are talking about force rather than power in a punch. The difference is force doesn't mean you're having damage. All it means is you having a certain amount of mass applied to an area, and a certain amount of mass times acceleration applied to an area. Now, this can be a lot of force because you have a lot of mass moving something, or a lot of force because you have a major acceleration happening to a small mass. Either one of them tends to be giving you the same. It can give you the same number. What I always use an example is if you think of a smart car, one of those little cars, going at 1 mile every 10 hours, it has roughly the same amount of force as a baseball going 90 miles per hour. And I may have did the math wrong, it's pretty much a smart car going 0.1 mile per hour has the same force as a baseball going 90 miles per hour. But as long as you're not stuck against the wall, if you get hit by the baseball, it will do immediate damage, while the smart car will probably just push you along the way. If you think about it, a person walking usually goes at about mile and a half per hour. So what you're dealing with is something slower than a walk hitting you. Chances are it's not going to do that much damage. It's just going to move you along with it. And that's actually one of the big problems that I've seen with a lot of the entertainment-based channels. They're dealing with force and force and force, and they're not telling you how much power is in this. Now, when we are dealing with the punches, there are a lot of different things that we have to look at. But before I do, I will tell you why I'm skipping over this week looking at the kata and the intermediate moves and moving to this. And the biggest reason is it's spring break for me. I am a professor, and so in spring break I don't have access. Well, I could have access to my classroom, but I usually decide I'm going to be taking a little time off. So that's why I'm taking a break from that. Now, there are a couple other things I actually do want to mention. One is in April, I think it's April 14th, I'm going to be doing a signing for my book, Off the Rails and Serious and Gregarious Things, as well as the new translated version. Yes, the Serious and Gregarious Things is now available in Spanish as Flor de Pitaya y las Cosas Más Preciosas. Slight variation on the title, and I've mentioned why that variation had to happen. Now, the other thing I actually would like to talk is there's actually something that I came up which I thought was interesting, and that is people being tested in martial arts and failing a test. And I never understood this. Now, in part, it had to do with this. I always went to small martial arts schools. Most of the people weren't trying to make it into their living. They had other jobs on the side, and the studio was a way for them to continue their hobby. So usually they would tell you, you know what, you're ready to test. Let me know when you want to do it, and we would go and we'd test. Now, all my teachers knew who I was. They knew exactly what I knew, and there wasn't much on the way of how big of a committee. When I got my son done, for instance, I was in Okinawa, and I knew all the people who were on my committee, and they were the ones who told me to test. So, they already knew what I knew. The idea behind this is this. I will actually tell you, in teaching, when I actually have a small class, let's say 15 students, I know each and every one of those students. I know what they know and don't know. I know what they need and don't need. When I'm actually teaching, and I have taught a class of over 100 people, I tend to lose people in the crowd. Now, a lot of times I can actually tell you if I know what people know. If I'm in a small class, I can tell you who is going to get what grade before they even take a test. Almost never surprised. Every so often, there has been a couple times. There was one time when someone's grandmother had a heart attack the night before the exam. They didn't do as well as they were expecting, but that's something we were able to talk about. While I'm in a big class, unless someone is there every day talking, asking questions, I have no idea who they are. And so I guess in big schools, having big tests makes sense. It is also a money-making thing for a lot of people. I mean, you think about it. I will tell you, when I test one of my students, I do not charge for the test. I test them when I see they're ready. In martial arts, not in college. And that's actually how they get there. That's how they move up in rank. There are some people who have come to me from other schools who have asked me for if I would test them, and I tell them to take time because of different things. For instance, sometimes their punch isn't how I want their punch to be. It's not strong enough especially for me. I want a lot of power in the punch. I don't want it to be just they're putting their hand out, and maybe if they hit something, might get lucky. I want them to understand how the techniques work, because the way I see it, if you are moving up in rank, it should be to be able to help other people learn something that they wouldn't learn from someone else. A lot of times, this actually is kind of one of the things that varies. A lot of times people go to videos and say, oh, I've learned as much martial arts through videos as through a school because, I just need to learn the katas and that's it. Well, if you're not getting the intermediate moves, then yeah, that's fine. If you're just learning the kata, if you're just learning being told step, punch, twist, step, punch, and that's it, you really can do that on a video. If you are learning movements from one spot to the other, how to do it, fixing every aspect of it, you're going to be able to do a lot more. And so that is one of the things that does happen. Again, I actually have a small school. I don't want to get big. I like the way I'm at because, like I tell people, I'm fortunate enough to be able to do martial arts as a hobby. I have another job. But a lot of people don't have that luxury. They want martial arts as their career. And I'm not going to say there's anything wrong with it, but what I am going to say is, if you have a lot of students, if you're in a school with a lot of students, well, these big committees do need to happen. So, the whole idea of failing a test, to me, just means that you're at a large school. If you're at a small school, there's no reason why you should be tested if you don't know what you're doing. Now, as for gloves, one of the most cited things is a National Geographic's Fight Science episode where they got Bass Rutten and they had him punch a bag with his barefisted, with the MMA gloves, and with the boxing gloves. And if you actually watch this, you notice that, okay, there's something kind of odd that happens. Yes, they did find that there was more force with the bare fist than with the boxing glove or the MMA glove. But when they were comparing the MMA and the boxing glove, there was about the same amount of force. There was a couple kilogram difference in the amount of force that they actually produced. And that's actually only part of the story. That's actually one of the things that is sensational. Oh, well, we can see that this happens. And a lot of people think, okay, well, there is actually some people who suggest that there's more damage with gloves now than without. And I don't know why, because the data even in the entertainment version is showing the difference. Before we actually go into that, I want you to think of some of the famous boxers of the day. Max Baer, for instance. Max Baer, a couple people died in the boxing ring when he was fighting. He hit barefisted. Dempsey, again, some people died in the ring while he was boxing. You do have a lot of these old boxing matches where people died, and if they didn't die, they ended up, they called it being punch drunk. And now it's actually changed a little bit, but punch drunk used to be the guy who had been hit, who was still relatively young, and he maintained brain damage through his entire life. He was a young guy, he had been fighting, and his mind no longer worked. That happened a lot with no, barefist boxing. You also had other injuries that can end up happening. For instance, a lot of sinuses in a lot of places in the face can end up breaking, which can end up leading to certain types of infections. It can be more life-threatening. Now with gloves, we don't get that big of an injury, but there is actually one thing that is problematic. We can end up getting repetitive head injuries. It may also be one of the reasons why some people have suggested MMA might show less neurological problems than boxing. For one, not every MMA fighter is trying to strike to the head. Some of them are trying to do joint locks, different things that won't affect the brain. The other thing is, it's not you get knocked down, count to 10, and then the guy comes up. It's the guy gets knocked out. The ref used to jump on and say, it's over, and that was it. And so the thing is, there's a lot of factors that actually affect why certain things are a certain way. Now, when we're dealing with gloves, which is what I really wanted to talk about before I went on my rant, there are a couple different things that we can actually see. I actually went through what's called PubMed, which I recommend a lot of you, especially if you have access to it through college campuses. You can a lot of times get a lot of free articles on what is being researched. Unfortunately, when I was actually looking at boxing gloves, comparing MMA gloves and boxing gloves, what I found is one article, and it was through the Journal of Neurosurgery, which to me says, okay, these guys did their due diligence, they actually went through everything. And what they found is, initially, a couple things, I should say. One is, they actually determined two different types of damage that occurs from a punch. One is, if you punch straight, there's a straight amount of, by getting hit straight on, there's a certain amount of acceleration that happens, and certain types of damage that occurs. Then there's another type, which they call linear impact. Then there's another type, which is rotational impact. Rotational impact is if you're hit here or here, your head ends up getting rotational forces. What we have known for a long time is the straight linear impact doesn't produce as much damage as the rotational impact. Meaning, if I get hit here and I just go straight, there is damage, but it's not as much as getting hit and getting my head to rotate. And that's actually one of the things they found with the gloves. Now, in linear, both the MMA linear impacts, MMA gloves and boxing gloves, really, yes, they did produce as much force and could produce as much damage. The problem ended up happening when they actually started looking at the effect of rotational accelerations when you're wearing a boxing glove versus an MMA glove. What they found is the rotational difference was the rotational difference was more severe. In fact, in these things where they use the rotational of MMA gloves, they found that the MMA gloves would actually produce more power and more damage. And so at the end, pretty much what we can say is, yes, the heavier boxing gloves are safer than the MMA gloves, especially because you don't have this rotation. But both gloves are actually safer for people than if it's a straight punch without gloves. So a lot of times people will say, oh, well, gloves don't really protect the fighter. The answer is, well, the research actually shows, yes, all gloves help protect the person getting hit. From one punch. The problem is, how many punches are people taking? Barefisted, you're not going to take too many punches to the head and be okay. I mean, even just one punch is enough to potentially be lethal. Boxing gloves, they tend to reduce the amount of force. They increase the time it takes to transfer the energy, and so you will have some protection. So a lot of times when you see people ask, well, what's safer, gloved or ungloved martial arts? The answer is obviously gloved is safer. What's safer, the boxing glove or the MMA glove? Well, for one punch, the boxing glove would actually be safer. The problem is, how many punches are you taking to the head with a big, heavy boxing glove versus the lighter MMA glove? And The other thing is, with the MMA glove, remember, you have these rotational accelerations, which can end up causing more damage. Now, next week, I hope to be back in the dojo and going back to intermediate or transitional moves. But I hope you enjoyed this. If you can, please subscribe, or if you really want to help out, consider buying one of the books. Like I said, I will be doing a signing in San Diego in April 14th, and I'll let you guys know about that more next week. Thank you, and have a nice day.